going to do is introduce you to Kaspersky Lab, if none of you have ever heard of the company. So Kaspersky, what we do is anti-malware. So you might call it antivirus. Anti-malware really is more than antivirus. It's any bad software that makes its way into your system is kind of what the goal is intended to stop. That's what we do. And it all started in 1988 when a young man named Eugene Kaspersky, and there's a picture of Eugene right there, when Eugene Kaspersky found the Cascade virus on his computer. He was just got out of college, has a degree in computer programming and cryptography, and went into his first job was an internship. And he found this virus on his computer, and he was really fascinated by the way this thing had gotten in there and started manipulating its way around the system. So he wrote a little application that would help him find other viruses on his computer. And from that application, we've now grown into the world's largest privately held anti-malware software company. We protect just under 400 million endpoints worldwide. We've got just under 2,700 employees. And every single day that goes by, we see another, this is an interesting number. I think some of you might be shocked by this. Every day that goes by, Kaspersky sees an additional 500,000 PCs and devices that become protected by our umbrella of protection. So we're growing quite rapidly. One thing I do want to address or talk about are these logos down here at the bottom. You can see several of them there. And this is just a snapshot of about 135 different companies that use bits and pieces of our technology in their products. So you know, you could say we're kind of enabling their security products that they bring to market by our rock-solid technology. So that's kind of a testament to how good the technology really is. All right, now we're going to move to the next slide. So this is an interesting slide. A lot of people, I don't think, realize how big of a problem we're dealing with here. And you can see what this is the number of signatures or malware fighting files that Kaspersky has to date. You can see the last 2.5 years, it's just gone out of the stratosphere. You can see where we've seen this exponential hockey stick, if you will, in the last couple of years. In fact, on any given day, we see about 71,000 new threats. Now, what we do with those threats is we create what's called a signature file. And on any given day, we'll create about 8,000 signature files. Now, the biggest day we ever had was last year in September. We had one day where we created 13,500 different signature files in one day. Now, 1 year ago, our signature file database was just over 3 million. It just had cracked 3 million and like 6,000, I think, or something like that. And today we're at 4.7 million. So just in the last year, we've seen a 50% increase in the total number of malware samples that we are seeing, or signature files rather, that we have in our database. So it's been very, very aggressive growth. Now, does that mean that the cyber criminals are out there writing more viruses than they ever have? Well, yeah, it does. But really what it is we're seeing a lot of the same types of viruses. We're seeing the same virus we saw last year, the same virus we saw 2 years ago. And the cyber criminals are using technology. They use technology called packing. They use some technology called crypting, and what that is it's taking an existing virus and kind of repackaging it and putting a different bow on top, if you will. So when it goes through a virus scanner, they're hoping that the virus scanner won't recognize that. One thing I do want to draw your attention to as you look at these numbers is you'll see that even though we're getting 71,000 new threats a day, we're only having to write about 8,000 signature files to combat that. It's not a one-to-one ratio. There's several reasons for that, and I think the biggest reason is just basically technology. We do have some pretty unique technology that allows us to write one signature file that will detect an entire family of viruses, in fact. So that way you don't have what we call signature file creep, where eventually you wind up with a machine and your hard drive is full of antivirus signature files. So there's other technologies, for example, advanced heuristics, where if a piece of code comes through the scanning engine and we say, oh, that looks like a virus, it's acting funny, it's looking for some strange ports, it's doing things that normal applications don't do, we're going to watch that and kind of see what it does, and if it starts to look suspicious, we're going to stop that and send that sample up to our virus writers for them to see what it really is. So heuristics are enable us to detect what's called a zero-day threat, a threat that is brand new, that's had no, that's basically in the wild that no one's ever seen before. So we can detect viruses without signature files, and that kind of helps keep your hard drive space low. Another point I want to talk about here is what's called a mobile malware threat, and that is a family of malware that is written specifically for a mobile smartphone. So this is your Android, if you will, your Windows-based smartphones. We're seeing viruses written specifically for those. An interesting one that we saw, in fact, Kaspersky discovered the very first Android worm. And this particular worm, what it would do is it would put an icon on the main screen of your cell phone, and it would say media player. So, you know, you're like, oh, okay, I want to listen to you know, Black Eyed Peas or one of your favorite songs, whatever, and you would click on this media player icon, which really, in effect, did nothing except send an SMS text message off to a pay-per-message company, which billed the user $5 every time they hit the button. So, you know, that's just the kind of stuff that we're seeing out there. There's other ones that are written that we're finding that are meant to fish information off of the user as well, so they can get passwords and that type of information. So, and who would have thought a year ago that we would even be thinking about threats written for smartphones? You know, that's certainly something that took a lot of people by surprise. And I want to address one more thing as we move on. Macintosh viruses, I have numbers for that as well. And there was an article, or actually a study done by Secunia Institute last year, it was the very end of last year, where they identified the Mac OS as the most vulnerable operating system. So, and there's several thousand pieces of malware that are written for Macintosh too. So if you have Macintosh, don't sit there and say that you're immune from viruses, because you're not. That is definitely, and you know, people say, well, I haven't seen a virus. Well, viruses today aren't written to be seen. The virus writers of today are really after trying to be as stealthy as they possibly can. They want to remain in the background so you don't even know that they're there. So if you've got a Macintosh, you'll never know you have a virus unless you've got something that's searching for viruses. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So moving on to this slide here, is this your sad reality? And I've delivered this to several audiences, and certainly to this date, no one has said, no, this is not my reality, where they're seeing this exponential growth in malware that I just pointed to in that the slide previously with the chart that kind of hockey sticks. You're seeing this exponential growth. Your management teams are seeing exponential growth. Your IT departments are seeing exponential growth. However, your finance department is not giving you an adequate budget to fight that big battle that you're being faced with. So it's a big problem where you know, everybody wants more money and everybody needs more money, but the budgets just aren't there for us. So the problem with that is you're being asked to fight an exponentially growing battle with fewer and fewer resources every single day. So that's a big problem. This is a huge issue. But one could argue that it doesn't really matter what you're spending on IT. In fact, if you take a look at this, is an interesting one here where the FBI or the Pentagon, the Defense Department, was actually hacked. The plans for the F-35 Joint Strike Force fighter were compromised. And, you know, the Department of Defense spends, I don't know how many cajillions of dollars on security, and they had a breach. You could take a look at the air traffic control system. If you get on an airplane, this certainly doesn't make you feel comfortable. But it just goes to show you that it doesn't matter what you're spending, you could suffer a breach. In fact, there is an interesting article here. If you're a frequent flyer, this should really send chills down your spine, that the air traffic control system has been repeatedly hacked. In fact, the words they used in this particular article is that it's been hobbled. And now this particular situation happened in Alaska, and what it appeared to be was that the hackers were looking for employee information of the FAA and not necessarily trying to hack into the planes, but it still doesn't make you make you feel any more comfortable. Now, at the end of 2010, there was an interesting study too, and what I did was on this next slide here, I put a couple of key ideas out of the study by Ponemon, which for whatever reason reminds me of Pokemon, with my kids play, but they came out with a study where IT managers across the study group, and there was some 900 people studied, 64% of them said that I don't feel any better, I don't feel more secure on my network than I did last year. So it's not, if it's not getting worse, it's at least staying the same, so they don't feel any better. 59% of them said that malware and protection against malware and malware that has attacked their system and that they've had to clean up and use resources drove up their cost. And I think that's a pretty easy one to understand, but 60% is a pretty high number. Now, this one was interesting, too. 60% of the respondents said that on any given month, they're seeing around 50 or more attacks every month that are against their network. And generally, those attacks are attempted hacks or attempted breaches, people trying to get information. And then 90% of the people have actually lost sensitive information, and that could have been based on a hack. It could have been based on somebody, having an accident where they sent out proprietary information in an email that shouldn't have gone out, et cetera. And then 61% have actually experienced a malicious data breach where the hacker was successful. So these are real numbers, and these are very current numbers, too. These are only about 2 months old, 60 days old. So if that is part of your reality, then hopefully this presentation will help you a little bit. And by the way, this is not your reality, knock on wood, because you're very fortunate. I always tell people that if you've not been hacked yet, don't worry, they're trying to. And you saw the study there a minute ago, 60% of the people have seen a little more than 50 attacks a month. They're trying to get your data, and if they don't get it the first time, they're going to continue to try. So the real trick here is trying to stay ahead of them, or at least protecting yourself as well as you can, so you don't run into problems. And this kind of sets the stage for the rest of the presentation. We're talking about the endpoint now, and the endpoint is the target. You'll kind of hear through several of the 10 items that I talk about where the endpoint really is the key here. And I'll bang that home a little bit. And there was a great study by Charles Kalaji who said the endpoint on your network is no longer this island unto itself, if you will. Now it has become a key part of the battle. It is now the primary line of defense against attacks on the network. And Charles Kalaji, if you don't know him, works for IDC. He's a brilliant, brilliant man. And I think he nailed it right on the head there. So just to kind of now show you where these attacks are coming from, the number one vector of attack today is still, and has been for quite a while, by the way, email. Email continues to be the way that most cyber criminals are spreading their venom, if you will. In fact, just yesterday, and I thought this particular one was dead, but just yesterday I got that email that said your UPS package, tracking number XYZ, has gone undelivered. Click here, to find out the current status or whatever it is. And I'm sure most of you on the phone are nodding your heads like, yeah, I've gotten that one, or I've gotten the one that said I love you, or I got this email, that said such and such and such. And it was clearly a bogus fake email trying to spread malware. And we, in fact, even at our own office at Kaspersky, we had one person in our office actually clicked on the email. And, of course, when you click on something in our company, I mean, literally alarms are going off, and the IT guys and the virus researchers are running down the hallway to this desk saying, what did you do? What did you do? And she said, I clicked on this email, And, of course, the first question you have to ask is, did you send a package UPS? Well, no, I didn't. Okay, why did you click on this, It's one of those things, and we're going to talk about the impact that this has on employees, or I guess the impact an employee can have on reducing cybercrime. We'll talk about that in point number 7 as we get down into the presentation. But email is still number 1. However, I'll share with you later what I think is going to take that over shortly. Internet video is an interesting one, too. We're seeing this quite a bit where, and again, it's usually spread by email or by some social networking methodology, like a Facebook, where somebody says, hey, check out this video, and you click on the video and you begin downloading malware at that point. Personal websites and business websites, I'm going to kind of lump these in together. There was a study that was done, and it was back in January, where it said that of all the websites, now this isn't, I need you to listen carefully because I'm going to say it wrong, but of all of the websites that are propagating malware, that are spreading malware, 88% of those websites are legitimate, either personal or business websites. They're actual, real, honest-to-goodness websites that somebody has that they're either conducting business through or they're sharing their, their hobby with or whatever. And that website has been hacked and compromised and is now spreading malware, unbeknownst to the owner of the website. An example here might be you go to CNN.com to get your daily news download, and someone has hacked into CNN.com, and when you hit that website, suddenly you're starting to get malware, and you don't even realize it. And most of us have seen that pop-up window that says, oh, you've been infected with some kind of virus. Click here and pay $39 to eradicate it, or find more viruses or whatever. And that's generally, that particular type of virus, the rogue antivirus, is typically spread by an infected website that's a legitimate website. So just to let you know that. So you need to be very careful. And lastly is social media. Social media is the Facebooks, the Twitters, the LinkedIns, et cetera. And we're seeing quite a bit of not just phishing scams where people have hacked into somebody's Facebook account and then they start sending messages out where, hey, I'm in London, I need $100, can you please wire me the money? But we're also seeing links being sent via Twitter, links being sent via Facebook, where people are saying, hey, check this out, you got to see this guy's website, whatever, and you go to it, and of course it's a malware-laden website. So the prediction I have for you is this: within 3 years from today, if you will, I think social media is going to bypass email as the #1 threat vector that cyber criminals are using. And you ask yourself, why is that? And it's pretty simple, I think. #1 is it's widely accepted. Everybody's on Facebook. I mean, there's what, 400 or 500 million people or something like that on Facebook. It's ridiculous. And people like it. It's a way for you to connect. And also, people like to click. We all like to click on things. We like to click on things because we're people, and we particularly like to click on things where our friends have sent us and said, hey, check this out. And of course, we do that. We're a click-happy generation, and that's kind of what we like to do. So I really believe that social media is going to kind of take over where email left off. So that's that. All right, so let's go ahead and dig into these 10 things. And really, before I get into this very first one, I want to tell everybody this is not going to be a presentation where I'm saying, make sure you check your patches on Tuesday. Make sure you're downloading all the patches you can, although that's important. These are more business types of concerns and policy types of concerns, if you will, regarding cybercrime. Now, I will say this, our researchers have asked me to let everybody know that this is the year of the Java exploit. So they do want to caution everybody that if it is a patch Tuesday that comes down from Microsoft, or a patch from Adobe, or a patch from Java, make sure you are installing those as readily as you possibly can. We're seeing a lot of what are called Java exploit kits on the market, where you even your high school kid can go on the internet today and purchase for about $1,000 what's called a Java exploit kit. And they can write malware. They can be guaranteed infection rates. They have online tech support. They have phone tech support, where if you want to infect somebody, they'll help you write that malware. And they're doing a lot of these things for particularly right now, the Java operating system. So be very careful and make sure that you're taking care of your patches this year. All right, let's go ahead and dig into data center fixation. And this is one of those things where and I'm seeing less and less of this, but I do want to touch on this. And what it really boils down to, and I ask people, I say, okay, how many of you here have a mobile smartphone? And that you get your email on, you might have some passwords, you might have some applications on there where you might check your frequent flyer balance, et cetera, and people are like, yeah, I've got that here. I'm right here connected to my hip. All right, great. So you got one hand up. And I said, okay, how many of you here in this room have a laptop that you carry around with you? On that laptop, you've got your mail, you've got some sensitive documents, you might have your launch plans for your next product, you might have your financial plans, you might have your tax return even on your laptop. And they're like, yes, that's me too. And I got a room full of people with two hands in their air. I'm like, okay, great. What you've just demonstrated to me is that at a minimum, 2/3 of the data that you've got in your organization is not in your data center. So you need to start thinking about ways to protect the mobile devices and not just building a bigger wall, if you will, around the data center, and using technology such as DLP to ensure that you're protecting data regardless of where it resides. So keeping in mind that data is not sitting in the data center is very, very important. So that is point #1. And I think that's a pretty easy one to understand. And I'll get into that in a little bit more depth as we move down through this. The next one's called information amnesia, and this is really forgetting the value of the data that's sitting on that device that you would have traveling around with you. So for an example here is, I always like to give this one, how many of you have gotten a call from, let's say, your CEO, CFO, COO, some C-level employee who said, hey, it's me, I left my laptop in a cab. I left my laptop on the plane. I lost my laptop. I don't know where it is. I left it in the airport somewhere. How many of you have gotten that? I mean, most people have gotten that, or at least had nightmares about it. Just as a case in point, by the way, the number of laptops reported lost or stolen in U.S. airports on a weekly basis in the United States is 12,000 a week. So this is a big problem. People absolutely do lose these devices, and that's just laptops, by the way. That does not include mobile phones that have, you know, data, proprietary data on those either. This is just laptops. So this does happen where people lose these devices. And of course, we've already discussed where there's really critical data on these devices that you don't want to have in the wrong hands. And by forgetting the value of that data, by going to your CEO saying, hey, Bob, no problem. I know you left your laptop in the back of a cab. Of course, the first thing you're going to do is hit your mute button and say a few choice words. But once you get back on with Bob, you know, you're going to say, we're going to just overnight you another laptop. It's, you know, an $1,800 asset. Don't you worry. And what you're telling Bob really is, hey, the content that you have on your laptop to me is really worthless. You know, it's basically an empty bottle of Coke. And the truth of the matter is, it's not an empty bottle of Coke. That laptop has a lot of data on that. It has a lot of time and effort and presentations and all kinds of stuff on it. In fact, a study that was just done last year showed that in America, this is just in the U.S., by the way, for enterprise customers, whenever they lose a laptop, the cost to replace that laptop is $49,000 per loss, because there's IT time spent in acquiring the new unit, shipping the new unit out, getting the new unit set up, repackaging all the applications on it. The person who then gets it then has to get it all back to their standards and, you know, get all their passwords in and their favorites and all this stuff, and their email set back up. And you can see where quickly that $49,000 price tag seems pretty realistic. So you definitely want to make sure that you are, I mean, first and foremost, make sure everybody in your organization understands really what the value of that laptop is. It's not a $2,000 device. It's a lot more than that. You want to make sure that you're insuring it for that much. You know, that's another thing you might want to discuss with your finance people is, hey, how do we insure these things adequately? Because, you know, if we lose 4 of these a year, that's $100,000, or that's $200,000. You know, so you want to be very careful and make sure that you're viewing the data on there, not like an empty bottle of Coke. Another thing you can do is make sure you're protecting that endpoint. Make sure you're protecting that laptop with something that makes it more secure, i.e. antivirus, i.e. DLP, passwords, encryption, etc. Make sure you're using the tools that are available to you. Because, like I said, at 12,000 units a week lost, at $49,000 a pop, it's not a pretty story. So, all right. So moving on to number 3, and I thought this was dead. I actually thought migration myopia was dead. And what this is people who take work home from the office, work on it on their home machine, and then bring it back into the office, or work on stuff at home and take it into the office, et cetera. You can see where there's this path back and forth from the home to the office. And I thought this was dead because I just figured, oh, everybody's got a laptop at work. They're going to bring it home. They're going to do whatever. And by the way, the United States has just surpassed Japan in the last year as working the hardest of any other company or culture in the world. Americans now work more. So that means we're doing more work at home. And the reason I thought this was dead, but now I know it's not, is I got a call just from my brother. And about a month ago, he called me. He says, hey, I've got this Excel spreadsheet that I need your help on, because, you know, he was trying to do some pivot tables or something like that. So, like I'm an expert, right? So he basically threw the Excel spreadsheet on a thumb drive, took it home to his PC to work on it, where his kids had been playing World of Warcraft on the Facebook, all over MySpaces or whatever. God knows what those kids have been doing on that computer all day, right? And then he throws in his thumb drive and then works on his spreadsheet, brings it back in the office. And, you know, heaven forbid that there was some kind of malware on his home system that now has infected the corporate network. So this is a big problem. This is a problem, and it's happening every single day. And I think it's happening more because people are taking more work home. It's happening more now than we think it really than it really is. So how do you protect yourself against that? Well, there's several methods you can do. But I think the easiest one is to, if you're not shutting off your USB ports in your network, which might not be the right answer, by the way. If you need to at least force a scan on that USB drive before anybody can take data off of it. It needs to make sure it's been scanned for viruses by a very good virus scanner like Kaspersky. That's one way of doing it. The other method that I've seen, which I think is a little bit more altruistic and organizations can get a lot of miles out of this, is what we've seen at Kaspersky is, let's say a company that has 400 people, when they buy anti-malware for their network, they'll also take an additional 400 copies of our home product and give it to their employees at obviously a pretty significant discount, so they can be sure that the employees are protected at home and their families are protected, et cetera. And the real reason is so they don't infect the corporate network when they bring stuff in. So we're seeing that quite a bit, and that happens a lot at schools, where a school will buy, deploy, and then they'll buy stuff for their students, et cetera. So that's something that is happening today. So migration myopia. All right, device delusion, and this really boils down to taking your mobile device and using the same security profile as you would have on a desktop. And this is really an IT issue. This is not a user issue. And interestingly, I'm surprised by this. It's about 50-50 from all the people that I've talked to. Some companies out there do just this. When they deploy their anti-malware, it doesn't matter if you're Sally in the sales department that has, the entire state of Georgia or Florida as her sales territory, and she's in and out of airplanes all day, and she's in Starbucks and all kinds of access points all throughout the day, or Bob in accounting, who's sitting in his desk all day and never leaves the corporate network. And they just throw a blanket security profile across all of those users. And I think that makes it easy to administer, certainly. It's not necessarily the best way to do that. Sally needs to have a much higher level of scrutiny and a much higher level of protection than Bob in accounting does. So what you want to do here is set up intelligent profiles based on what this person's going to be doing. Now, there's another piece here I want to talk about, and this one everybody laughs at, and everybody says, yes, I know what you're talking about. And see if this rings true for you, where when you're sitting down with your C-level employees, the owner of the company, whatever, and you're setting security profiles, they're going to say to you, you know what, IT, this is what I want. I want everybody locked down. I don't want anybody wasting time doing Facebook during the day. I don't want them even going on the web. I don't want them to look at pictures. I don't want them to bring in stuff from, lock them down. Like a prison. I don't want anybody doing anything except us at the C-level. We want to be completely unrestricted. We want to do everything we want to do, blah, 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 right? And I think that's very true across the world today, where the C-level employees effectively have minimal or no protection whatsoever, while everybody else is, locked down like galley slaves. And while that seems to make sense, don't you think the cyber criminals know that? Don't cyber criminals, haven't they figured out that if they really want to attack a company, if they really want to get some great data, don't go to Bob in accounting. Don't go to Sally in sales. Go to the top. Hit those guys. And in fact, we're seeing a wave of what we call targeted attacks against senior level employees and companies. In fact, we saw one that was so brazen, and this is an interesting story, where the cyber criminals actually called into the company's IT department over the weekend and impersonated the CEO of the company on the phone to the IT help desk guy to get access to different directories and files. And of course, the IT help desk guy just did it, not knowing that it was an imposter, it was a fake phone call, it was bogus. So cyber criminals, they'll go to any lengths to get that data if that's what they really, really want. So my counsel to you is if you're setting up security profiles, make sure that you're setting them up appropriately for who's going to be using them, and also counsel your senior executives that, look, I know you want to be unrestricted, but you are the biggest target in the company. So if anybody needs superior protection and superior security profile, it's you. So that's something to think about. All right, moving on to number 5, social media mania. And this is really an interesting topic here, because if you remember a few slides ago, I said social media. And again, just to remind you, this is the Facebooks of the world, the Twitters, and there's a bunch of logos here, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, et cetera. This is social media. Social media is here. social media is here to stay. This is how people talk today. And it's not just you talking to your old college roommates or your old friends, your neighbors, whatever. Even, I mean, frankly, this is how I talk to my kids and my nephews and nieces. But businesses also talk like this. Most companies out there today have some sort of social media presence where people can follow them on Facebook and LinkedIn, et cetera. And your suppliers are talking to you this way, your customers, et cetera. So this is some of the ways business is done today. So a lot of companies will say, yes, our policy for social media is there is none. Nobody can get on Facebook. And I don't think that's the right thing to do. I really don't. I don't think that's the right answer. Like I said, because if business is being conducted that way, you certainly don't want to stifle that. I've seen some companies set profiles that say you can only be on social media during 12 and 1, as if, I guess that's the virus-free time. I don't know. Other ways to do this are obviously application control, where you can filter out certain links. You can filter out certain activities that are going on while someone is on Facebook. Because the problem with this Web 2.0 world, that while it's all sexy and cool and everything, there's a lot of things that happen that IT really has limited visibility into there. So you want to make sure you're protecting yourself as much as you can without stifling the flow of your business. So that's very important. Now, this is what's the scary part here. I surveyed probably, I don't know, 5,000 or more people, and I've asked this question. How many of you have a social media policy at your work? And if I'm in a room of probably between 100 and 200 people at any given time, I might get 3 hands. Typically, it's 2 people that raise their hand, which tells me IT really needs to think more about this social media and think more about how we want to go and deploy this within our environment safely. What is our policy behind this, and what kind of rules are we going to apply to it? So that's really important. And considering the amount of attention that cyber criminals are putting on this, I think it's actually critical. All right, let's move on to attention misdirection, and this is an interesting one. A guy named David Stelzl is a great guy. David wrote a book, in fact, called Data at Risk, and if you go to David's website, stelzl.com or something like that, you can kind of Google him. I think he's got copies of that book. You can get him for free as a download. But he's a wonderful guy, and he did a study where he asked, I think it was 900 or 1,000 people, showed them a picture of the house. He said, okay, this is your house. How are you going to protect it against crime? What are you going to do? And, of course, 95% of the people said, I'm going to have doors. You know, I'm going to get an alarm system on my house and have it monitored. The folks from Texas all said, I'm going to have a gun and get me a dog. But you can kind of get the idea here that people are saying, this is where I'm going to, you know, invest in. So then the next question was, okay, fine, where are you going to put the most money into? Where's your biggest bang for your buck going to be? And they all said prevention, which was, I'm going to build a bigger wall around my moat, around my castle, if you will. I'm going to build thicker walls. I'm going to build, you know, basically protect that house from the outside. And this kind of goes into that protecting the data center before we protect the endpoint mentality. You know, most investment for IT tends to be protecting that data center, but I've already illustrated that at least 2/3 of the data isn't sitting in the data center. So by protecting that data center more, or let me put it this way, not giving the endpoint its due amount of homework or attention, we're doing ourselves a disservice and possibly opening ourselves up for cybercrime. Because a lot of people, what they do is they say, okay, who's the market leader? And I'll just use antivirus. Who's the market leader in antivirus? Just throw that on there because they're the market leader. Well, that doesn't mean they're the best. That doesn't mean they're protecting better, you know. Or, hey, you know what, we've blown all of our budget on the firewalls. What's that free antivirus we can just throw on these systems real quick, you know, just so we have something? That is attention misdirection at its finest. It's really not doing your homework, if you will, as to where you should invest your security investment. I think the right response here is making sure you're spreading it between the prevention and detection, so when you do need to respond to something, you can do it appropriately. This is my favorite one, number 7, awareness deficit, and I'll make a strong statement here. If we could knock this number 7 out, if we could knock this out of the park, I would say 99% eliminate cybercrime, if we could knock this out of the park. And the problem is it's such a difficult thing to knock out of the park. And what it boils down to is making sure your employees are aware, making sure there's a culture in your organization that says, hey, there are cyber criminals out there. My data is valuable. I need to be careful. I need to be smart about what I do here. This is training employees not to click on emails that come from UPS telling them their package has been misdelivered. This is training employees not to click on Twitter links that have ridiculous URLs in the title. There was one that came out on Facebook just yesterday that said, hey, Southwest is giving away free flights. Click here. And most people will go, oh, I'm going to click on that, right? I'm going to get a free plane ride. But if you looked at the URL, if you actually looked at the www or HTTP, blah, 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 it was bogus. It was like GOO.GL. So it was trying to deceive people into thinking they were clicking on a Google link, when in fact they were clicking on something that effectively gave permission to open up your Facebook friends list, and then it would send notes out to all your friends and spam all your friends with the same thing that said you get free flights. So it's that mentality that says, wait before I click. I'm just going to hold on a minute. What is this? Is this too good to be true? What does that URL say? And that's something that you can't just do once a year, because people come to me and they say, yeah, we got this lick, Tom, you know, because every year we make our employees go through, you know, sexual harassment training. We make our employees go through a business ethics and supervisory traits training. You know, they got to have it done by March 18th this year. That's what we do, because we're also making them do this, you know, safety on the internet training. And we do it once a year. I'm like, once a year? Once a year ain't cutting it, you know. If once a year worked for sexual harassment, we would never have sexual harassment, right? So it's not going to work for cybercrime. It's not going to work for cyber awareness. So it's really this culture, this mentality that has to be, and I don't want to use the word beaten into people, but certainly a constant reminder to people of the value of the data that they're playing with, of the importance of their jobs and their roles in protecting it. And that's something that we've got to figure out a way to knock that out of the park. The problem here too is that whenever budgets get cut, which we talked about in I think it was our third or fourth slide in, whenever budgets get cut, this is the first thing that goes, is employee training and awareness. All right, I'm going to start picking up the pace a little bit because I think I'm falling a little bit behind on time, but this is called threat camouflage, and this boils down to not reporting a security breach. Now, just to let you know, in 46 states right now, there are laws that require you as a company to report a security breach if that security breach contained or compromised somebody's personally identifiable information. So if you've got data that has, you know, somebody's name, address, phone number, social security number, credit card, whatever, you've got to, by law in 46 states, report that. And there's various ways you've got to report it that depend on the state. For example, in some states, you have to, clearly you have to let the person know, hey, I had your data on my network because you did a transaction with me and it was breached and compromised. I need to let you know. You might want to keep a look on your credit card statements. You might want to call a credit reporting bureau and, you know, make sure you've not been ripped off, whatever. In some states, you also need to report that to the law, to the not the legislator, but to the what's the word I want to use, the police or whatever it is. I'm not using the right word there. And in some states, depending on the number of people that have been compromised and the amount of records, you have to report it to the media also. So it's not a quick little, oh my gosh, can we cover this under the rug and, you know, not tell anybody? It's not like that. You really have to be careful and know the law. Now, one thing I caution people to do here, and I tell people, look, I can guarantee you've got if there's a hurricane that hits your building tomorrow, or a tornado, or some kind of business interruption, you've got a plan written down that says we're going to do this, 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 and this. We're going to fly a plane to people here. We're going to set up a phone room over here. We're going to divert all network traffic to here. You've got it down pat. You've probably practiced and rehearsed it inside and out. What do you do if there's a data breach? Do you have a plan for that? Do you have something that says if we have a data breach, step 1 is this, step 2 is this, step 3 is this, step 4 is notification. This is the press release we're gonna release. It's already been written. It's in a file. This is a letter that we've already been written. All we got to do is put the name of the person that's been compromised and this and da-da-da-da. Here's a great one. Here's the forensics company that's going to be our first phone call as soon as we get a breach. We've got them on either on staff or on contract or a retainer, where if we are breached, that's the first call we make, is to have them get in here and find out what happened, where it happened, how it happened, who did it, how many times have they tried this before, how can we prevent it again, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You need to have some sort of breach security fallback plan, I guess, if you will. And the problem is most people don't report cyber attacks. And what that and by the way, if someone breaks into your bank account and takes $1,000 out of it, you don't have to report that. There's no law that says you've got to report that somebody stole your TV. You don't have to report that. You only have to report it if it's identifiable information that's going to compromise someone. And so the problem is a lot of people don't report malicious attacks where people take money from them. And that's the problem that enables cybercrime, is that if you're not going to report it and you're not going to do forensics and report the results of that, then the cyber criminal is going to be validated and just do it again. Big problem there. All right, getting near the end here, compliance complacency. This is an interesting one, and I'm going to spend just a moment on this. And what this boils down to is saying, okay, I know that I'm in this business. I'm a hospital. I know that I have to be HIPAA compliant. I'm going to get a HIPAA compliancy booklet, and I'm going to follow it to the letter of the law. And once I do that, I'm going to check off my box that says I'm HIPAA compliant. Or, hey, I handle payment cards, and I'm going to follow the PCI to the letter of the law and check that off on my box, and then I can put in my quarterly statements that I am, PCI compliant. Well, this is my thing about compliancy. Compliancy doesn't always solve the problem the best way. Yes, am I saying you don't need to be compliant? No. You need to make sure that you're compliant because that makes business sense for you. What I'm trying to say is, do you need to go above compliancy, or are you complacent just being compliant? I'll give you the best example I can in as few words as I can. This is a boat called the Titanic. And that boat, according to law, to be compliant, they had to have 1,060 seats available on lifeboats. And they actually overshot it. God bless these guys. They did it. They got 1,178 seats on lifeboats. The problem was there were 3,500 people on that boat. So if you want to give them an award or a score or a rating, they met the standards. They were compliant, and they could check that off and move on and start building, chairs for the dining room, whatever. And in fact, I wouldn't even say they met compliancy standard. They exceeded them. But it wasn't the best plan. And that's all I'm going to say on that, is make sure that you're doing the best thing for the data that you're trying to protect, and keep an eye on compliancy. Don't get me wrong, but make sure you're doing the best thing for your data. The last one is this, assuming that everything's okay. And this is basically surrounding yourself with your people on Monday morning. Hey, how are we doing? Oh, we're doing great, man. We just got the latest antivirus signature file from our vendor. We deployed it out to all the stations. We did a scan on all the stations. Everything's great. We're doing great, man. We're covered. Everything's good. We met the compliancy standards. We're doing what we're supposed to do. Only to find out that you really weren't okay. And you discovered that you had your pants down, so to speak. And I'll give you a quick story. This is a true story. Happened in Jackson, Mississippi, Jackson Public Schools. The guy's name is Stefan. He's the network administrator there. And like any of us in the world today, education certainly not being exempt, the only ones that suffer this problem, they're being asked to keep IT resources longer than they wanted to. They had computers in that network that were growing beards, basically. These things were ancient. And they were trying to run antivirus on them. Their antivirus product that they were using, and I can't tell you who it was because honestly I don't remember who it was, but they were using, one of the top 3 antivirus vendors out there. And they were doing their scans, they were getting their updates and all that stuff, but it was just a bulky product. It was just very taxing on the resources of those systems. So the kids couldn't do their work. The teachers couldn't input the grades. When they did a scan, it basically just shut the network down, and it was just not a good scene. So they started doing their homework, and they found out that Kaspersky is a really good product. It's very light on system resources. When it does a scan, it does it quickly, da-da-da-da. So that was what they were looking for. So they threw us on there, and they took the other vendor's product off, put us on. The very first scan they did, it's a true story, 15,701 worms, botnets, viruses, you name it. Any kind of malware you can imagine was running rampant on their network. But they thought they were okay. Why? They had antivirus. They had a big name antivirus out there, as a matter of fact. They were doing their scans. They were getting their updates. They were doing everything by the book, and they had no idea. They had no idea that they weren't protected. So my lesson here is don't fall for just, hey, we're okay, and go to lunch. Always get a second opinion. If it's antivirus that you're talking about, whoever you've got now, take 2 machines, 2 production machines, and put somebody else's product on there. If you've got a copy machine in the break room and the vendor told you it was going to do 55 pages a minute, or you'd go through 5,000 pages before you had to change cartridges, put another vendor's product in there right next to it and test it. See if it's really doing what it's supposed to be doing. If it's a firewall, make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. Always do your homework. Always get a second opinion is my message there, because the last thing you want to do is find out that you were wrong. So that was point number 10. So these are the 10 ways that IT can enable cybercrime or enable a cyber criminal to make their life a little bit easier that we want to prevent. And it really boils down to having good conversations with your people that work with you, with your suppliers, with your vendors, with your users, with the people that you're charged to protect. And so that's really what it boils down to. Now, I want to give you one other, this is my last slide here, a couple of other thoughts that will keep you kind of abreast as to what's going on out there in the threat world. By no means am I intending to scare anybody by saying, oh my gosh, there's 71,000 threats a day. Oh, you know, the sky is falling. I don't want to say that. But I do want to encourage people to learn all they can about what's really going on out there and what's being done in law enforcement, what's being done on the antivirus front. What are the new threats that we're finding these cyber criminals using? Just so you can, like I said earlier, stay a step ahead of them. So one way to do that is a website called threatpost.com, and Threatpost is the Kaspersky Lab Security News Network. So you can actually, and in fact, if you look at this page, you'll find out there are no advertisements. Kaspersky, I think we have a banner ad somewhere on this website. I can't even find it, frankly. So it's not like this, we're going to Kaspersky-ize you to death. This is an editorial on security issues is what it really boils down to. And it's just like you can see, this is just today's headlines, by the way. You can see where Microsoft had issues for bugs. Here's a Trojan that's on the loose right now, and how it mimics banking sessions. You can see where there's HIPAA certification down there at the bottom, where there's an issue there where it's violating. You know, there's some issues where there's privacy violations. So you can kind of get an idea of the things you can learn from this to kind of be, if you will, be the security expert in your organization. If you're not already, this will certainly take you up a notch. A couple of other great sites that I strongly encourage if you really want to really elevate yourself is Krebs on Security. Brian Krebs runs this, and he is brilliant when it comes to just digging into real security issues. And once in a while I'll have some really cool articles in there about crime rings and how this crime ring broke into a certain network and how they did it, what they did, the methods they used to launder their money. So you can really figure out how to protect yourself a little better, or how to keep your eyes open, if you will. And finally, SecureList.com is an that's another Kaspersky website that talks about what are the current viruses and the current threats in a very granular level. So it might even it will even tell you in the last hour what viruses we've seen escalating around the world. So that's all I've got for you today as far as the 10 things that IT is doing to enable cybercrime. And I want to thank EOS for